As part of my design team duties over at the Counterfeit Kit Challenge, we make our own supplies once a month. They call it Forgery on the 4th over there. I call it my monthly makes.
I'm going to work on 3 projects today. I'll start off with my favorite and then we'll move on to some easier items. So let's get started. Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty, where I create with paper and photos in artful ways. So let's start with my favorite in recreating these decorative pins. And I'm going to do that with wire and enamel dots. I also have some experimentation to throw in there, and we'll see what works and what doesn't. And if you're new here, all of my makes are inspired by real world products that I don't own, so I'm taking supplies that I do own and giving it a try myself. In fact, this is one of the cases where the faux product is better than the real product, because these hat pins, decorative pins, are often very bulky, and I've been poked by them more than once in the past. So these faux products are much safer and flatter in scrapbook layouts. So to get started with this, I have some wire and some wire snips. If you have ever purchased a pair of die snips, you can use those. And if you don't have any wire, don't worry, I've got you covered. I'll show you a hack for that in just a minute. So I'm going to start by trimming out some scrap paper in a very thin strip, and this is going to give me something to glue everything to. I snip off a piece of wire to the length I want. You can make these whatever length you enjoy. And then I'm going to space out my enamel dots so that these will cover up most of that paper, although in the end I will have to end up trimming some of that away. Right now I'm just kind of getting a sense of my spacing. I prefer enamel dots that have at least 3 different sizes, just because that gives more dimension and interest to these, and that's how the originals are already. So that is what I'm doing here. Now these can be a little bit finicky to get in place, so a pair of tweezers is helpful, and just a little bit of patience. This really isn't a hard project, but it does take a little while to get all of those pieces lined up and sitting nicely. Adding a little extra glue than you think you need is a little helpful here, because that helps the enamel dot kind of float above the wire, because it's tending to want to teeter-totter to the side as it sits on the wire. Now here's my hack. If you don't have regular wire, you can use twist ties. And in fact, I think the twist ties work better. It's a little hard to get off the excess paper from the twist ties, but if you give it a twist and kind of scrape it off, you'll get that end clear. But then on the other end, you already have that paper attached that you don't have to worry about. It's nice and flat, so it's going to hold your enamels in place without that teeter-totter action that I mentioned. And so you just need to add a little bit of glue and then set those all aside to dry. So I would recommend the twist ties for sure, if you've got the paper kind that you can peel off that paper, and not a plastic kind that's harder to remove the plastic. All right, here is my beginning of experimentation, and I've got various Nuvo drop products. So the white ones that I did just a moment ago are called stone drops, and those ones are actually kind of a sandy, gritty texture. The one that I just did in the orange was the jewel drops, which are much more liquidy. Those aren't going to end up working. And then the final product I have there on the left is stickles, and those were better, but still not quite up to snuff. So I wouldn't recommend stickles. I would stick with the enamel dots, really, and just go with that. So once these have plenty of time to dry, I just trim off the excess paper, and we've got these sweet little embellishments that are better than the originals. Next up, I'm going to recreate this word art, and this isn't complicated at all. It's nothing new in terms of crafting, but you may not think about doing it unless you've seen it done. So I used my Cricut to cut out words, mostly because I wanted to get a nice size, and I don't have dies in this size. So I cut out 4. My top layer is a thicker kind of paper, because we are going to be adding liquid watercolor to this, and that will hold up to the process better. So I'm just going to stack these up much like card makers do and glue them all together. Make sure they're nice and aligned, and then I'll press them down with a block for a little while before we move on. So here is the paper that I have in my scrapbook kit this month. If you haven't seen my kit build video, I will link you up. I've pulled out a couple of colors of distress ink. I was going for Distress Oxide, but I didn't have the colors I wanted in oxides, so I ended up pulling out Distress. But you can do this with any water-based ink pads, and it'll work just fine. So I smush them onto a palette. You could use scrap plastic that you would have from packaging that you would just throw away. Add a squirt of water. I like the fan brush because it adds a little bit of control to where the splatters go. If you leave it wide, I'm drying in between layers. So my first layer was the reddish pink, and then my next layer is yellow. But as I was saying with that fan brush, if you leave it flat and wide, you'll get a wide set of splatters. But if you tip it more vertically, you'll get a narrower set of splatters. So I do that really vertical with my last color here to really try and get that color in specific areas that didn't already have very much color. And here is what it looks like in the end when everything is dry. So easy peasy. Go ahead and go do this one. All right, next up is being inspired by chalkboard paper. Now, this paper was popular back in the day, but I couldn't find any in my stash when I was putting together my kit, so it is super easy to make your own. What you need is a circle punch or die around the 2-inch range. Mine is a little bit smaller, but that's okay. Just get, somewhere in that zone. We're going to line that circle up on a grid so that you can find the center point and you don't have to do any math or anything. Just kind of center it inside of the grid. Find the center line of each of the grid marks and then use a ruler to go from top to bottom and left to right, and then that will find you the center point. And we're going to trim along those lines to the center point. So we are creating 1/4 of a circle. We're going to use this to trace on our paper, but before we do that, we need to mark a 1/4 inch from each edge of that circle, and that's going to give us a border to leave around the edge of the black paper. So make sure that the flat edge of your quarter circle is lined up with a grid, and then mark it at a 1/4 inch on both sides of the curve. And I put a white piece of paper under here so you can see everything a little bit better. I line that up in the corner of my paper, and then I just trace with a white gel pen in between those markings that we put on there. And you could use a paint pen or a jelly roll pen, whatever kind of white pen you have. Once you have each corner done, then just use that straight ruler, line it up against the edges of each of the circles, and then draw yourself a line across. So the biggest problem I had with this project is that my gel pen dries pretty slowly, and that ink would get stuck on my ruler. And as I was moving my ruler around my project, it started getting smears of ink everywhere. So keep that in mind. Clean up between passes or work slowly, let it dry. Also, my pen is running out of ink, so I had to go slowly with my with my strokes so that it would actually make clean lines. All right, for the next pass, and this is totally optional, I line up my circle with the previous straight lines that I make, and then I do the whole process again. So go ahead and trace your corners, and then you'll line up your ruler and do the next pass. And this is going to give us a double border that looks like chalk on a chalkboard, even though we know it's just paper and white gel pen. All right, here is my final slow pass with my gel pen to get, it's not the final line, but there you go. You can kind of see how slow I was actually going. Now, what to do about those splotches? I decided to roll with it and make more splotches. So I wanted to make some intentional thumbprints. I drew some words. I drew some little pictures here and there, and I purposely smudged them. And that kind of gives you that feeling of the chalkboard that was erased, but not completely erased. So I added a little stick figure and some kind of school type vibes on there and called it good. So that was my opportunity to embellish with something that had started off as a mistake. Then off camera, you can see I made a few more of those decorative pins that we started the video off with. And with that, I am done with my makes for this month. I hope you got some good tips and tricks and some things to try yourself. Until I am back with you next time, I hope you have an artful day.